What's up, everybody? What a beautiful way to start a game, isn't it? That's how all football games should be started off. I believe wholeheartedly. That was at the Jets versus Bill game recently, and that's how they started their night off. I think that's the best way to go. This is We Talk Freely. My name is Drew Smith, and I hope you'll stay here for the whole show. We've got a lot of news to cover. First off, we're going to start off with a little bit of talk about gas prices and stuff like that. But what I need you to do is go down and like the video and subscribe to it, please. There we go. Starting off, we've got an article here from Gas Buddy talking about gas prices to spike 50 cents to $1 per gallon in the Corn Belt. It feels like it's happening everywhere, honestly. You know, if we go back just about 3 years, 4 years, gas has gone up way more than that. But if we're expected to see another 50 cents to $1 going up, goodness. Just imagine what it's going to do to the price of everything to see this kind of price increase. So, it goes on in the article to say, late season refinery issues ahead of the switch to winter gasoline cause squeeze. Drivers in Oklahoma, Missouri, South Dakota, North Dakota, Nebraska, Minnesota, and Kansas, be ready. Gas Buddy, the leading fuel savings platform saving North American drivers the most money on gas, today predicts that gas prices in these states will spike anywhere from 50 cents to $1 per gallon over the next several days. While there are few details on the particulars on what's driving the increase, trade sources tell Gas Buddy a refinery outage may be to blame. So, the refinery outages have been going on for a while. If you guys remember from the beginning of the Biden administration and the cutting off of the Keystone pipeline, we saw a lot of refineries slow way down. Why did they slow down? Well, without that direct flow of oil, you know, that pipeline that everyone was kind of hedging on, we had to rely on transporting it in old-fashioned means, like using trucks and trains, and of course, ships to get the oil and resources to these refineries. It goes on to say, quote, the details on the outage generally lag the response we see in wholesale gasoline prices. Due to the nature of these situations, a refinery that goes down has contractual obligations to supply certain volumes of gasoline to stations. If an unexpected outage happens, the refinery that goes down suddenly may not have enough supply to meet its obligations and has to find another refinery to buy from. This can push prices up considerably as the refinery could be a very large buyer. Adding in that we're just a week away from the switch to cheaper winter gasoline, we have a very large but temporary squeeze in the market, said Patrick DeHaan, head of petroleum analysis at Gas Buddy. Well, I appreciate Gas Buddy for this. I'm going to put this link in the description below. If you guys want to read further into this story, I think you pretty much know what's up on this, but definitely check it out. Go to their website. There's a lot more, well, there's a little bit more to it. And I'm going to continue on with this story because Reuters also is reporting on this as well. Gasoline lights up U.S. consumer inflation, underlying trend steadily improving. So they're talking about the inflation rate is what is steadily improving. Yes, it has gotten better, thankfully. We were seeing really high rates just a few months ago. I believe we gotten up to like 7.5%. And so now we're getting back down to the 3 to 4% range. Most of it is speculation at this point, but it seems to be averaging out. If you remember, though, our rate under Trump was closer to the 1.5 range, and things were a lot nicer back then. So this article goes on to say, Let's see here. U.S. consumer prices increased by the most in 14 months in August as the cost of gasoline surged, but the annual rise in underlying inflation was the smallest in nearly 2 years, likely giving the Federal Reserve cover to leave interest rates unchanged next Wednesday. The mixed report from the Labor Department on Wednesday was published a week before the Fed's policy meeting and followed data this month showing an easing in labor market conditions in August. Economists, however, believe officials at the U.S. Central Bank will continue to signal an additional rate hike this year given the stickiness in services inflation. You know, if we go back to what Gas Buddy was saying, that looks very much to be true. You know, the cost of gas impacts everything. From your groceries to your iPod, or your iPods or AirPods, excuse me, to your headphones. It doesn't matter what product it is that you're buying. Fuel cost will impact that total price. There's nothing you can do about that. Why? Because of the logistics of it. To get that package from one place to another. You know, here in Savannah, Georgia, we have all kinds of products that are coming off the dock or coming off the ships onto the docks, going both directions, import and export. As somebody who used to work out at the ports, I can tell you there's a massive amount of fuel consumption that's done there per day. Like little things like fertilizers for crops and stuff. You know, there's like a dozen dump trucks per ship. And these dump trucks are running circles all day between the warehouse and between a hopper right by the ship. And they are just burning gas the whole time, just going. And if that cost rises up on fuel, then they have to pass the extra expenses on to the buyers of that product, or at least the people that are in charge of shipping it to the States. And no matter what, that extra cost comes down to the consumers one way or another. So if the cost of fertilizer goes up and that fertilizer is going to a wheat farm, then we're going to see a spike in prices on that wheat. If the wheat gets more expensive, then products that are made from wheat are going to also become more expensive. It's a horrible, horrible monster of a problem that we need to get under control. Now, I did see a video earlier that Joe Biden is promising to get gas prices down, but really, when's that going to happen? Let me move forward here. So, next thing that we have, I don't know if you've heard, if you've been on your social media, I'm sure you've heard, Hunter Biden is finally getting indicted on 3 firearm charges. Yeah, and that's here from Breitbart News that I'm bringing. But it's not just Breitbart. There are so many publications right now that are running this story. I just picked this one because I really like the picture. Hunter Biden indicted on 3 firearm charges, no tax or FARA violations. Now, I thought this was a very interesting thing, and even Donald Trump had a comment about this. He said, the gun charge, is the only crime that Hunter Biden committed that does not implicate crooked Joe Biden. 1 down, 11 to go. The Democrats, with all their horrible, very unfair, and mostly illegal witch hunts, have started a process that is very dangerous for our country. They have opened the proverbial Pandora's box, and it is possible that the USA will never be the same again. So sad. Yeah, I do find it very interesting that we're just looking at the gun charges right now, but I guess it's one step in the right direction. You know, and Breitbart's even pointing it out here. No tax or FARA violations. That's something we definitely need to see, because we're talking about millions of dollars in tax evasion. And honestly, the reason it didn't come out yet may be to do with the pending impeachment inquiry that's going on right now. A lot of the issues that Hunter Biden has seem to be linked directly to his father, possibly. And we're going to find that out here as the impeachment inquiry is going in. The evidence is going to come out, and we're going to see if that is true. If it's not, then I would expect to see some charges directly against Hunter after that point. But if it is linked directly to Joe Biden, then I would expect both of them to be charged once that information comes out. But let's go on and see what Breitbart has to say here. Special Counselor David Weiss on Thursday indicted Hunter Biden on 3 criminal charges related to his possession of a firearm. Now, if you remember, I talked about David Weiss on previous episodes, and one of the main issues that people have with him is that he tends to stall things out in court. So charges kind of pass that statute of limitations and things just end up getting dropped. He kind of drags it out, so it also will kind of fade from the media, whereas they start reporting on more and more and more current news. These kinds of stories start getting more buried deeper and deeper. So keep an eye out for that kind of thing with what's going on here. I doubt he'll be able to do something of that sort. Possibly he is serious about pressing these charges, but we'll see. Going back to this, Hunter Biden was charged with 1 count of false statement in purchase of a firearm, 1 count of possession of a firearm by a person who is an unlawful user of or addicted to a controlled substance, and 1 count of false statement related to the information required to be kept by federal firearms licensed dealer. Hunter could potentially face prison time. Weiss's indictment did not include any Foreign Agents Registration Act, FARA, or tax violations. Weiss charged Hunter Biden in the U.S. District Court in Delaware after his deal with the president's son collapsed on judicial scrutiny. After the deal collapsed, Weiss announced plans on September 6 to indict Hunter Biden before the end of the month. Hunter Biden's previous plea deal included tax violations, but not FARA violations. Weiss told the judge about his investigation into Hunter Biden, including an ongoing probe into potential FARA violations, causing the judge to question the agreement that was ultimately nixed. Thursday's charges are unlikely to be the last, ABC News reported. Yeah, so this is very interesting. It really does seem like it's the very beginning of what's going on, or what's going to end up happening to Hunter. I think with the pressure that conservatives are putting on the judicial system as a whole, we're going to see more and more stuff. But what are the depth of these charges really going to be? We see a lot of Democrats, and we definitely see the Biden administration constantly padding themselves and reducing charges. Another story that I thought about putting in today was one of the, I guess, Antifa, and don't quote me on this, I believe it was Antifa person or BLM person that was making bombs in their home with the intent to use against the government. They got 40 months, but then you look at, was it Enrique Tarrio of the Proud Boys and getting 22 years. Given the levity of the two cases, I think most people, not all, but most people believe that those prison sentences should probably be reversed, Making explosives is a very, very dangerous and very, very high crime. To only get 40 months, that's just a slap on the wrist for that kind of a charge. So I wouldn't, looking at what Hunter Biden's going through in this case here, if he is convicted, if he is brought to trial and convicted, I really don't expect him to see any hard time or anything like that. I believe it said could be charged up to 25 years in this story. I really doubt that that's what we're going to see. Most likely it's going to be some fines that his dad has to pay or something like that. All he's got to do is sell a couple paintings, and he'll probably be able to cover those fines himself. And everyone's just going to end up forgetting about it. But do keep in mind, if you or me, we get caught with a firearm using drugs, they're going to throw the book at us. Different rules for these Democrats. So moving forward, and I'm going to try to keep these videos a little bit faster. A few people have reached out to me and they say they love the videos. They just wish that they weren't a whole hour long. So I'm going to kind of rapid move through these. And if you notice some breaks in between, I'm probably going to break them up into shorts. So when people only have like a 15-minute break, they can catch some of this news as well. But moving forward, we have Speaker McCarthy slams White House memo to news outlets demanding scrutiny of impeachment inquiry. Y'all, so yeah, the Biden administration is literally reaching out to the media, asking the media to specifically target this stuff and cover for Hunter and cover for Joe. This is wild. The media should be untethered. They should be able to get all the information they can and report it to the people. They should be honest. They should be fair. They should be direct, not led by our government. If our government is forcing the media what to say and what to do, there's definitely some violations of the First Amendment. And I'm sure there's other violations that are tied in there too. I'm interested to see what Republicans do from here on out, but let me read into this article a little bit further. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy on Wednesday called out the White House for sending a memo to executives at news outlets asking for increased scrutiny of the White House Republicans' impeachment inquiry into President Biden. Ian Sams, a spokesman for investigations at the White House, wrote the memo one day after Mr. McCarthy, California Republican, directed House committees to open the inquiry. Quote, "It's really concerning to me that the White House is telling the press what to say. I think the press should be wanting to know the answers too. Did the president know when he went to dinner with his son that he would get a Porsche?" he said. And I actually have that here in a follow-up. So definitely go to this. I'm actually going to, there's a lot of quotes of what Kevin McCarthy said. And this is actually directly from his office here. And it says, "Corporate media has political bias. It's a fact of life. Remember when they did everything they could to bury the Hunter Biden laptop story? Still, it's a true act of desperation for the Biden White House to give the media marching orders." Yeah, publicly like that too. That's wild. You would expect, honestly, for them to, use like maybe some backdoor texting or something like that, try to keep it hidden. But this was rushed out and pretty public. Really damning right here. So that's exactly what happened yesterday when the White House counsel's office delivered a message to news organizations demanding the media ramp up its scrutiny on White House Republicans. The takeaway was clear: do Biden's bidding or else. As George Washington University law professor Jonathan Turley noted, quote, "The letter removes any pretense of separation between the Biden personal legal team and the White House counsel's office. Just think, if the Biden administration is that eager to order independent media organizations to paper over the facts, how much easier would it have been for them to signal the Department of Justice how to handle Hunter Biden's case?" That's a great point. After its loss in court on Friday, and I did report on that as well. If you go back, not the last episode, but I think the episode before last, I did report on that. After its loss in court on Friday, you'd think the White House would have learned its lesson about silencing speech. When it comes to Washington, Americans deserve truth and transparency. Nothing less. True. Rep. Ashley Hinson, a former news anchor, said it exactly right. Republicans will follow the facts wherever they will lead, and the media should report the facts without bias. Fact. Opinionated fact. Fact. That's what we expect. We expect our news media to report without bias. People like me, independents, we can be slanted a little bit, but we're upfront about our bias. But when you look at like MSNBC and CNN and Fox and those alike, typically they always come out and they say that they don't have bias, they're just reporting the facts. And that's not true. You can't lead people into believing that you're reporting just the facts and then sit there and only report certain things that you like or dislike. I'm going to try as I go on, as I do in all my episodes, to be as unbiased as possible. This is called We Talk Freely, so I definitely want people like yourselves coming in here and talking to me. And if there's anything that I'm wrong about, if there is any evidence or any news articles that dispute anything that I am reporting on, please, I implore you, bring that information to me so I can bring it up in the next episode, because I would like both sides to have their ability to talk here and be able to get all the true information out. Otherwise, I'm wasting your time and mine. So, Kevin McCarthy was actually confronted with the press as he normally is, and this is actually I thought this was actually a decent exchange. I'm not the biggest fan of Kevin McCarthy. Like I said in previous episodes, anybody who just moves into an office before being elected becomes very sus in my eyes. But there are some things that lately he has been doing right. Go back to, I think it was last episode, there's a lot of things that Matt Gaetz was talking about that I definitely agree with. I do think that Kevin McCarthy has been dragging his feet, but now that the impeachment has started, I'm starting to see some good movement. Tell me what you think in the comments below.
What impeachment inquiry is to do is to get answers to questions. Are you concerned about all the stuff that was just recently learned? Do you have any concern? Have you asked the White House any questions?
Yes.
Okay. Do you believe the president lied to the American public when he said he'd never talked to his son about business dealings? Yes or no? It's all right.
I can't answer that.
You can't answer that? Do you believe when they said the president went on conference calls? Do you believe that happened?
That's what the testimony says.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you believe the president went to Cafe Milano and had dinner with the clients of Hunter Biden, who believes he got those clients because he was selling the brand?
That's what the testimony
Okay.
says.
Do you believe Hunter Biden, when you saw the video of him driving a Porsche, that he got $143,000 to buy that Porsche the next day? Do you believe the $3 million from the Russian oligarch that was transferred to the shell companies that the Bidens controlled after the dinner from Cafe Milano took place?
That's what the testimony says.
Okay, then I go back. Do you think the president lied that he...
But is that an impeachable? Is lying an impeachable?
Well, you want to know... I'm not saying impeachment. All I'm saying is I would like to know answers to these questions. The American public ought to know, and that's what impeachment inquiry provides.
Yeah. So he's exactly right. That's what this impeachment
Yeah,
inquiry is all about.
you couldn't have
And
Evil
thanks,
Knievel, boy.
Rumble, for just playing videos that I didn't want. But that's what this impeachment thing is all about. It's about getting the truth out there. It's about getting the information that the Americans have been looking for this whole time. Democrats are out there screaming, "There's no evidence. There's no evidence. There's no reason to impeach." That's arguable at the very fairest as I can be. There's just been so much stuff that's coming out that becomes baseline circumstantial evidence that we should at least look into. And that's something, for about roughly 7-8 years probably at least, Democrats have been just trying to gloss over any kind of evidence that comes out. They refuse to let these court cases go to trial. And most likely you're having a hard time hearing me because I forgot to grab my microphone. But yeah, they never want these court cases to go to trial. They never want the investigations to be done because they're terrified of the other things that might be turned up. And, you know, Democrats, if they didn't want this information to come out, they should have played a little bit smarter in the past. They had the impeachment inquiries, what was it, 3 of them in total, I believe, against Donald Trump. They just continued to keep digging and digging and digging on these really, really small stories. But now here we are with Hunter Biden, with Joe Biden. We have video evidence, we have photo evidence, we've got an entire laptop that is just covered in questionable material from top to bottom, and Democrats just want to play the see no evil, hear no evil, say no evil thing on this whole thing. But you remember Russia collusion. You remember how they were supposedly influencing social media and all of that. They didn't have any real evidence. Adam Schiff held up an envelope in front of everybody saying that he had the evidence to convict Donald Trump, but nothing ever came of that. You know, we deserve these kinds of investigations. Democrats open the door to this whole process. So now Republicans, conservatives are going to use this same process in return. And I think it's all right. There's nothing wrong with investigations. If Democrats believe that Joe Biden has nothing to hide and that he's innocent, let the games begin. You know, let it come out. You know, if you ain't got nothing to hide, just keep doing your job, Joe. You're really doing a bang-up job on this economy anyway, right? So moving forward, we have multiple states now, which I know it sounds boring. We have 2 states now that have declared state of emergencies. And first I want to start off with Massachusetts because I thought this was very interesting to come out in the news. Here from Resist the Mainstream, and I saw it on a couple other sources as well, but I'll definitely link all this stuff that I'm showing you today down in the comments below. Massachusetts National Guard deployed to assist with spiraling migrant crisis as governor calls on White House. Now, I do believe New York is dealing with the same problem, but I can't remember. I don't believe they've declared a state of emergency as of yet. I'd be very surprised if we didn't see that for the additional resources. So the article goes on to say that Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey, a Democrat, Wednesday activated 250 members of the state's National Guard as rapid response teams to provide assistance to overwhelmed shelters for illegal aliens. Healey's activation of Guard troops follows her declaration of a state of emergency several weeks ago due to the immense pressure on the shelter system, according to Fox News report. Massachusetts, quote, Massachusetts is in a state of emergency and we need all hands on deck to meet this moment and ensure families have access to safe shelter and basic services, Healey said. More than 6,000 illegal aliens and their families are housed in emergency shelters throughout Massachusetts, the report noted. As a state that designates shelter as a right, Massachusetts is obligated to offer emergency housing to individuals in dire need. To address the immediate requirements, National Guard members were dispatched to 40 hotels and motels lacking service providers. Their role, Healey said, is to facilitate access to meals, medical care, and transportation. That's got my head scratching a little bit. Quote, the plan that we have in place today with the deployment of the National Guard, which happened just last month, will put National Guard staff soldiers in locations as part of a response to our non-service providers, essentially creating rapid response teams in places that we don't have the ground service contractors or case management services happening on a regular basis, said Lieutenant Governor Kim Driscoll. There's more to this article, but we got to keep moving forward. This is wild that we are dispatching National Guard to handle this migrant crisis. Yet I hear all the time, or I read all the time on my timelines, that there is no border crisis. We're not dealing with an issue. I remember not long ago so many of these states declaring that they were sanctuary cities. And if you're a sanctuary city, you should have been preparing for this kind of event, don't you think? I mean, it would make sense if you were going to make that declaration. If I declared my home as a gas station, I better have fuel on hand. If I'm going to declare my neighbor's house as a shop, I better have permission and the supplies and tools to make it a shop. So here you have these states that platformed against Donald Trump, going against him, trying to secure the border, saying, that they're a sanctuary city and immigrants are welcome there. These states should have been ready. It goes back to that old saying, careful what you wish for, you just might get it. So moving on to our second state that I wanted to talk about is here in Georgia. Governor Brian Kemp temporarily suspends gas tax and declares a state of emergency to help with inflation. So, Atlanta, Georgia, Atlanta News First, Governor Brian Kemp is declaring a state of emergency due to 40-year high inflation. As part of this declaration, the governor is temporarily suspending the state's excise tax on motor and locomotive fuel to provide direct relief to families throughout the state. Quote, while high prices continue to hit family budgets, hardworking Georgians deserve real relief, and that's why I signed an executive order today to deliver it directly to them at the pump, said Kemp. I'm glad to hear it, said Ernest Addock, who lives in I think that's supposed to say Jonesboro. I actually used to live there. Jonesboro. It sounds good. We'll have to see how it goes, said Xavier Wilcher of Atlanta. With gas tax suspended, Georgians will save 31 cents per gallon on gas and 35 cents per gallon on diesel fuel. It's a hard name. Is it Tayan? I'm not even going to try to. This person says, at Buckhead Blooms, said the rising costs of ultimately impact the services they can provide for customers. The past year, they had to cut their delivery radius because of inflation. 2 delivery vans mean weekly fill-ups costing roughly $600 a month. That's actually pretty cheap. Must be really fuel-efficient vans. Quality is our priority. All of our roses are imported. Will it help with the 30 cents? That is going to help a lot, said, let's see, I'm going to try it. Moscaso? I believe that's what it is. The executive order will go into effect Wednesday, September 13th at 12 a.m. and will remain in effect until 11:59 p.m. on October 12th, 2023. It could help with the cost of living. Let's start there. They're building up so rapidly in Atlanta, and the rent is, said Ava Bellamy of Smyrna. Consumers should expect the suspension to begin impacting prices after several days. There's more to this article. Like I said, I'm going to have these all posted down below. But honestly, this is kind of a double-edged sword to me. Reading this, I'm glad to see that Kemp is doing something, so I got to give credit where credit's due on that part. But where he doesn't get credit from me is if he would have acted in the very beginning during the election season, right, when Donald Trump was calling him about the reported, almost 120 to 140,000 questionable ballots. If he would have taken actions and and performed the investigations that we needed to see, then most likely Georgia would not have gone for Biden. It would have gone for Trump, and Trump would have won the election. Brian Kemp's lack of initiative in this whole thing for the past 3 years is why we are here in the first place. So declaring the state of emergency, he's really declaring a state of emergency on his own boneheaded decisions, in my opinion. He could have stopped it. He could have saved Americans from coast to coast a crap ton of money. We could have prevented a crap ton of inflation, and we could be sitting in a much better economy right now. But instead, Brian Kemp decided to toe the line for Democrats, and here we are with two different states, Massachusetts and Georgia, both declaring states of emergency. Lastly, I want to talk about some of the crime issues that we are seeing. In this article from Just the News, Chicago area sheriff admits car thefts, violent crimes remain elevated. I thought this was kind of interesting because I've seen a couple news reports today where people are saying that crime rates are down, that blue cities aren't the problem, and a lot of excuses for things that have been going on. But the problem that we're seeing is that crime rates have not gone down past where they were pre-pandemic. You know, Trump was only in office for a short period of time during the pandemic, and ever since then we've seen crime rates everywhere, not just blue cities, but everywhere go up. Now, unfortunately, most of these blue cities that have like these gun-free zones and relaxed policies against crime are leading the charge in the worst cities for crime across America. If you go back, I want to say roughly maybe about 7 or 10 episodes ago, I actually did a detailed overview of the top, I think it was top 10 or top 15 cities with the highest crime. I think I got down about 10 cities before we hit the first red city in the top. And so you got to ask yourself, why is this happening? Well, you have judges that are refusing to prosecute criminals. We have very laxed sentences against people who are committing egregious crimes, whether it's the big R word or murder or theft or you name it. People are walking away with basically little slaps on the wrist. But let me go into this article and let's read a little bit about Chicago. Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart says the county continues to struggle with car thefts and violent crime higher than pre-pandemic levels. U.S. Rep. Sean Casten, Democrat of Illinois, hosted a virtual town hall meeting Tuesday in which residents of the county could call and ask questions. As Gaston's guest, Dart was asked what is being done to slow crime in this country. Quote, "These are complex issues with all sorts of different rationales behind how we got there, what can work and what can't work," Dart said. There needs to be an understanding of A, what the facts are, and B, that this is complex with multiple facets to the whole thing. Dart said there have been improvements over the past few years when looking at violent crime. Quote, "Have there been improvements in a lot of different areas of crime? There have been," Dart said. Shootings throughout the country, specifically in Chicago, are down. Have they reached pre-2019 levels? No. Last month, the Illinois Supreme Court upheld the state's ban on certain semi-automatic firearms in Illinois. However, Dart said guns are still more prevalent than ever before. Quote, "The wild availability of guns is incredible," Dart said. "I've never seen it from my days as a prosecutor till now. It used to be rare to pull someone over and find a gun, but now it's flipped. Now it's rare when we don't find a gun in the car." Interesting, because he says that gun crime is coming down, yet he's finding more guns in cars. More people have guns. You would think if people owning guns were the problem, and more people are owning guns than ever before, that we would see an increase in gun crime. That's not what we're seeing, and even he admits it in his own statements. No, I think, honestly, what the real problem is in all of this is that we have these activist groups that are running around and they're blaming it on issues that really aren't the root of the problem. You know, I'll never forget when, and I can't remember who it was that said it, but it's always stuck in my head, and people are always repeating it. People are committing these crimes to feed their families. When you see somebody break into a car and steal a book bag, and you see people getting just randomly punched in the back of the head walking down the street, that's not feeding your family. Going to a grocery store and stealing bread and maybe some yogurt or something like that's feeding your family. But stealing just random products, stealing random people's clothes from stores. I mean, look at, was it Nike in Portland is shutting down? How are people feeding their families that way? Oh, sure, maybe they're selling all this stuff on eBay and getting the money for it, but whatever. If you were really concerned about feeding your family, you'd be going to the local grocery store and stealing from them, not to the local Nike and stealing those shoes. This whole thing comes down to activist groups being honest about the situation. If you stop making excuses for people and just start putting the crime on the individual, then we can start getting somewhere. But instead, we're blaming police officers, and we're wondering why the police are not showing up anymore. We blame the entire department, and we wonder why the departments are so short-staffed. We defund these departments and make it harder for people who are putting their lives on the line to even get a paycheck. And then we complain about how these officers aren't trained well enough because these departments are desperately just putting bodies on the street. We have to roll back. We have to stop virtue signaling and all this other random stuff about this issue. We have to get serious about it. And these states and these cities need to start getting real serious and start declaring a state of emergency and do just like the state of Massachusetts did and start rolling out the National Guard. Start getting these gangs under control. Start getting the teens and everybody else who's doing these mass robberies and things. Get that stuff under control. Stealing or taking guns away from law-abiding citizens is only going to make more victims. And just like with was it the governor of New Mexico, what is she expecting to happen in her state by making law-abiding citizens easier targets? All this platforming nonsense is just creating worse and worse problems. I beg these people to look at Kennesaw, Georgia. I made this example before, and I hear people talk about it all the time. They have one of the lowest crime rates in America. People need to look at that city. Look what they're doing. They encourage gun ownership. They have a strong police force there. And I know they have a strong police force there. It's ridiculous. Every time I go to a concert in that place, there's police everywhere. You cannot look any direction at any concert you go to without seeing an officer. They're serious about keeping things safe. Now, I don't know if I like that much policing. It does feel kind of weird when I'm in those areas. However, they have safe citizens there. They have safe tourism there. People aren't worried about getting robbed there. So we need to find a balance somewhere, and it starts with honest judges, it starts with honest DAs, and it stops with the media not pushing these radical ideas that put everyone in harm's way. Very last story. This comes from Resist the Mainstream. This is also talking about the crime that we're seeing in the United States. I forget who it was. But anyway, yeah, so Joe Scarborough, was it Micah Brzezinski? Caught off guard by surging crime rates. I watched this video earlier, and I'm going to pull this video up here in a second, and I want to re-watch it with you. I thought this was very interesting. He does definitely seem very triggered in this whole interview here. But I think that there's some very, very interesting points that were brought up during this discussion. and I really want to go over them with you bit by bit. So I may pause here in the middle of this. This is a 7-minute interview with MSNBC, MSNBC, sorry. And there's some really good questions asked here. I think the host here is actually starting to get real about everything that's going on and asking questions that should be asked to a point.
About 2 weeks away from the next Republican primary debate, and some candidates are still trying to meet the RNC's requirements. Former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson is one of them. He's now looking to boost his standings, expanding the states he will travel to in the coming weeks. That includes North Carolina, Georgia, and Texas. And joining us now, Republican presidential candidate, former governor of Arkansas, Asa Hutchinson. Good to have you on the show this morning.
Governor, thanks so much for being with us. Behind you, the United States Capitol. You have served well. You've served there. I want to ask you about Washington, D.C. right now. This is a little off. Is
this off topic?
It's off political topic. It's not about Trump. And it's not about getting into the next debate. It's actually about an issue, and it's crime. And I know Republicans have loved to say crime.
I want y'all to notice something here. When he says it's not about Trump, she literally says refreshing. That just kind of lets you know that even people that are working in the media are getting tired of pushing this agendist nonsense, this anti-Trump nonsense as well. I'm wondering if she's looking at her grocery bills or her house payments, her car note and stuff like that, and just wanting to pull out her hair. I'm pretty sure she's frustrated with all this nonsense, and I guarantee you, if I sat down with these two in private, I guarantee you if I had a good conversation with them, there'd be a lot that we agree about. But most of these media personalities that I'm noticing, when they're on these stages and they're doing these shows, they're talking a lot of stuff that I just really don't believe that they truly believe in. But let me let this interview continue.
Crime only happens in Democratic cities. That's not true. It happens in, the worst crime cities were in Louisiana and Mississippi. It happens in Florida, Jacksonville, et cetera, et cetera. But I want to talk specifically about the city that you're in right now. Headline in the Washington Post: a shaken Washington copes with surging violence. This is not normal. The Washington Times talking about all the people, the young kids that have come to work on the Hill, that are getting beaten up, stabbed, having their getting assaulted, getting robbed. House Committee is actually having to warn staffers about crime rates soaring in the nation's capital. Governor, it's not just the big Democratic cities that are out of control. You got Monroe, Louisiana. You got, Bessemer, Alabama. You got Jacksonville, Florida, out of control. What do we do? What do we do to turn crime rates back to where they've been since 2020, back to where they were in 2019? How do we get there?
Well, and you're right on the importance of this issue. I was in Georgia yesterday, and they're not asking me about Trump's legal issues. A single mom was asking me about what does it take to give my child a safe environment. And that's what they are concerned about in the schools, but also on our streets. And it's not just a big city issue, because we see fentanyl in our rural cities. We see the challenge of the smash and grab that is primarily in the inner cities, but we're watching it from across the country, and we're saying this does not represent the best of America. It's not the rule of law, and there's a simple solution here, and that is enforce the law. And whenever we see a flagrant disregard of the law, whether it is violence and there's not a follow-up enforcement and a toughness there, then you're going to see this continue, because they're just seeing a disrespect, and it's close to anarchy. And it starts with the president and his leadership and saying, we're not going to be funding places that are not enforcing the law. That is critical that we do this, and you're right on target on the importance of this issue.
He is, and it goes back to exactly what I was just talking about a few minutes ago. We're looking at a cultural problem here. When we're turning the police into villains and when we're attacking everyone who's trying to help us, then we're not going to get the response that we need. You see these numbers here. My computer is just not being nice to me today. I'm going to go back to these numbers that we had. Yeah, look at these numbers here. Homicide up 28%. Sex abuse up 6%. Assault with a dangerous weapon. Robbery up 67%. That's huge. That's not just regular theft. That's robbery. A total of 39% increase in crime in D.C. alone. Now, you heard him say it's not just blue cities, it's red cities too. And the three cities that he rattled off, I'm almost certain, are three cities that were in a previous episode that I was talking about that were under 10 blue cities. The issue was, coming into 2019, we had many of the blue cities were suffering the worst at the top 10 or top 15 cities, maybe even the top 25. I think the top 10 of that 25 were all blue and maybe one red. However, a rising tide raises all ships, right? And so what he was saying there is a little misleading, and he's trying to take the attention away from these blue cities. Yes, it is happening in red cities too. It's happening to all cities across the nation, because this is a huge cultural issue that's happening right now. These mass media organizations are influencing the culture. They're telling people that it's okay to steal. They're telling people it's okay to commit crimes. They're telling people if the DOJ or anybody like that comes out against these criminals, that it's racist, or that it's sexist, or something with an IST on the back of it, or phobic at the end of it. And the reality is that we're making excuses for certain groups that there should be no excuses made for. If every individual is equal, if we're all equal under the law, then regardless of who's holding the knife, who's holding the gun, the law is the law, and they should be prosecuted as such. Plain and simple. And like he went, like the presidential candidate here, like he was saying, if we just apply the law, we'll start to see a difference. Stop making excuses, stop bastardizing the police departments, and start looking at the criminals themselves. Start prosecuting. Start putting these people away. And then we can figure out how to smooth the system out from there. If there is some kind of systemic racism somewhere or something of that sort, then we need to go to those locations where it's happening, find out why, and go deeper into that situation and find the solutions. But to sit there and blanketly call all police officers from coast to coast racist, or say that they're all targeting certain groups of people, that just harms our country everywhere. But I could rant on this and sound like a broken record all night. Tell me what you think about this whole thing. What kind of solutions do you think would actually fix all of this? And before I go tonight, I actually have one last thing that I want to show you. And I think this is hilarious. I don't know if you guys follow Clown World at all, but I've recently started following them because they do have some hilarious stuff. And they posted this one, and I thought it was great, and I really want to share it with you. If you haven't seen it on your social media, this is epic.
Thanks, Bernard. Now, finally for now, a mysterious hole on a beach has caused a stir in North Dublin. A local astronomy enthusiast is hoping the crater in Portmarnock could be the aftermath of a cosmic event.
It's a huge, mysterious crater that looks out of this world. But is it? The unusual hole on Portmarnock Beach stopped local astrophysics enthusiast Dave Kennedy in his tracks yesterday, and he's certain the small but heavy rock inside it came from up above.
As you can tell by here, there's a scorch mark on this side here, so that would have been at the angle that it came down at. And it is weighty. I'm not sure if it's composition, but we're definitely going to have to find out.
The striking hole soon caught the attention of passers-by, many hoping that what they're witnessing is the aftermath of a once-in-a-lifetime cosmic event.
Y'all wonder why I ask questions. You wonder why I don't completely trust the news. Everyone makes mistakes, but I thought this is great. This is exactly this is exactly why you have to question everything. You have to look into the facts on things. These guys, I don't know if this was intentional here, but these guys pulled probably one of the best trolls of 2023. The fact that the local news media picked it up and did a report on it, epic. That is fantastic. My daughter and I were laughing so hard earlier when we saw this, and I can't help but to laugh now. That guy sitting there giving his professional expert opinion on what he believed happened in that location. And it's just two dudes that are sitting there digging a hole. You know, I got a beach not far from where I live, and I see these kind of dugouts all the time. Kids love to do this. They love to dig holes there. And the fact that these guys left a rock in the middle of it to make them think it was a meteor strike, mwah, it's beautiful. Guys, don't believe everything you see in the media. Question, you're on my show, and I'm bringing you guys the news links that are coming across my feed. Question everything that I'm showing you. My feelings won't get hurt. I'm trying to get to the truth. I want to talk freely about it. I want to talk to you about it. I just want to see what we can learn, how we can grow, and how we can move forward. Guys, that's been another episode of We Talk Freely. I appreciate you, especially if you've made it this long in the video. Please do not forget to hit that like button, to subscribe, and importantly, share it out to your friends if you think this is good information. Get down there in the chat. Let me know what you think. Give me counter information. If you have any kind of facts or anything that go against any of these stories, any of the information that I'm bringing out, please bring it to my attention, and hopefully next episode I'll bring your article up that you found and we'll talk about it there too. But until then, y'all stay safe.